knitting's most fundamental secrets. Hi everyone, Norman here. Most knitters don't know what to do when they drop a stitch and it unravels all the way down to the cast on. How do you fix a cast on stitch? Or very few knitters know why their right leaning decreases are so much neater than their left leaning decreases. So SSK versus knit 2 together. But whenever you don't understand something, you cannot really fix it either. So let me take you by the hand and possibly change the way you look at your knitting forever, because I'm going to show you how knitting truly works. Let's start with something seemingly simple some of you might already know to some extent. So a purl stitch is nothing else but a mirrored knit stitch. So for a knit stitch you keep the yarn in back, you enter from left to right, and then you pull the yarn here towards the front. Whereas for a purl stitch you keep the yarn in front, you enter from right to left, and then you pull the yarn through towards the back. So everything is exactly the opposite way, and when you turn things around, said purl stitch will form the exact same V all the knit stitches have formed, and despite having knitted different stitches here per row, it will form one uniform pattern. Now listen closely, a purl stitch is nothing else but trying to knit a knit stitch from the wrong side. If you truly understood that a purl stitch is nothing else but trying to knit a knit stitch from the wrong side. So if you truly understand this concept, the opposite must be true as well. You can also knit a purl stitch from the right side, and you can actually do this. So this is frequently called backward knitting, and this is the easiest way here to do this as a continental knitter. You anchor, wrap around, and pull over. If you practice quite a lot, you can also do it without this weird throwing around motion. So instead, dive in quite deep, flick the needle here towards the center, and then you can also do the wrapping around with your index finger. So again, dive in really deep, flick towards the center, wrap, and pull through. One last time. Dive in deep. You really need to go in deep because otherwise you won't be able to wrap. But for a beginner, this motion here is probably easier. And just as a proof of concept, you can also purl backwards. So you enter here this stitch here through, well, what appears to be the back loop. Then you do it like so. So very easy. With a bit of practice, you could also try to do this flicking style. Again, you need to dive in rather deeply, and then you can also try to do this. See, and if you don't go deep enough, it will be rather difficult to do the wrapping. By the way, if you are an English knitter and want to switch to flicking, this is typically the key. You need to dive in deep, otherwise you will never be able to do the wrapping. Now let's put 2 and 2 together and knit a little swatch and a 2x2 rib stitch together. So bring the yarn to the front, and then we can purl this stitch backwards, purl another stitch, then you need to bring the yarn to the back, important, purl backwards, bring the yarn to the front. So all this here is just to show you that your perception of the actual knitting direction is just slanted. You can knit your rib stitch or any other knitting pattern in either direction in any way you like. Oh, I need to bring the yarn to the front. And it just happens that our ancestors, well, they decided that continuously going in this direction is easier for them, but you could devise a knitting system that solely relies on knitting in this direction instead. It would work just as well, and in fact, some left-handers actually do it like this. And if you are a little bit crazy like I want to be, you could start your project with a provisional cast on, and then you can, after knitting a couple of rows, you can turn your project around and then simply start knitting in the other direction on top of that. And oh, there's a knot in my knitting here, but let's ignore that here. So I can knit in the other direction here. I could top this up by not turning around here. Last stitch. By not turning around, but instead knitting backwards. See? Knitting backwards here. Just to show you how truly well multi-directional knitting actually is. So I'm basically all over the place, knitting backwards, forwards, in this direction, in this direction. And if you take a look at the resulting fabric, well, you won't be able to tell a difference at all. Yet we are all taught knitting in a very specific way, but that is actually quite arbitrary. This is SSK, slip, slip, knit. So you slip one knitwise, you slip another stitch knitwise, and then you knit these two stitches through the back loop. SSK creates a neat left-leaning decrease. So here for this pair of socks, I decreased the gusset with SSK here over on this side, and knit two together over on this side, and the result is this decrease line. Now, a lot of people always complain that their left-leaning decreases aren't actually as neat, and that's why I frequently show a technique often called knit two together left, and it works like this. You enter the first stitch knitwise, and then you go towards the back and enter the second stitch through the back loop at the same time. So like so. And then you knit that stitch here through the back loop. However, you see, like so, and then you only pull that loop here through the first stitch and drop that. Then you yank on that second stitch and then you drop it. And this will form a left-leaning decrease as well. And technically speaking, it's the exact same decrease as SSK, but it often will look quite a lot neater. But how does this work? How did someone come up with this, and how can we actually understand this? Let's take a look. Let's analyze this bit by bit. So instead of SSK, I can also just knit through the back loop. I can knit these two stitches here through the back loop, and the result would be a slightly different left-leaning decrease, where these loops here are twisted as opposed to balanced. See how this loop here is balanced and this one here is slightly twisted and doesn't form such a nice V. When you enter two stitches here through the back loop and knit them, you are essentially rearranging the order of these two stitches. To prove that, I could also knit a little mini cable. Now I'm doing this without a cable needle, but I can also rearrange these stitches like so. See, now they have a different order. This one here comes first and then this one. And now when I knit them here together, when I knit these two together, I have my left-leaning decrease just as well. So the knit two together through the back loop part of the SSK is nothing else but knitting a little mini cable such as this here. But that of course is only half of the picture. So here in Germany, SSK, when I grew up, SSK wasn't a thing. Instead, we knitted a decrease that translates to Passover decrease, überzogen zusammenstricken. So you slip one knitwise, then you knit one stitch, and then you pass this stitch over, and the result will be a left-leaning decrease, and structurally this will be the exact same result as SSK, just a different way to get there. So why is that? Well, a directional decrease is just that you are combining two stitches into one. And if the right leg loop here comes out on top, it's a left-leaning decrease, and if the left loop comes out on top, it's called a right-leaning decrease, and there are just these two options. And you can either do this in one go, or you knit one stitch and then you pass this over, sort of like, like so, probably easier with a crochet hook. But here, this is your left-leaning decrease, but you can also pass over in the other direction like so, and then you have a right-leaning decrease. That's what decreases are. Now here is where things get, well, slightly tricky only. So we have the two parts of an SSK. So there's a mini cable involved and there's passing over. And another way to knit a slightly twisted mini cable goes like this. So you enter the second stitch on your needle here through the back loop, pull the yarn through. So I knitted the second stitch here on my needle, and then I move over to the first stitch and knit that. And the result will be a mini cable where the bottom stitch, the one below, is twisted and the stitch above isn't twisted. Bavarian patterns use this technique excessively. And now we can finally take a look at this weird knit two together left stitch from the beginning. So you enter knitwise. This is like slipping the stitch, but instead of actually slipping the stitch, you keep it on the needle. Then here you enter through the back loop, knit it, pull through. This can sometimes be tricky. So this is the cable bit. And now you just pass things over. So this bit here is passing over. So you could also knit it like this. Slip knitwise, knit through the back loop, pass over. But by doing it like this, you have the unique opportunity to keep this stitch here on the needle and yank it out and remove all that slack here from the stitch that will end up here on the top. That's the whole benefit of doing it like so. If I knit a normal SSK like so, so I knit a normal SSK like so, and as I knit the next stitch, here this stitch, I am entering this stitch. There are two needles in this stitch. This will enlarge this stitch. So what does this do? So obviously this stitch here needs to steal yarn, and it steals yarn from the adjacent stitches in order to be able to fit in my second needle. However, this stitch here, it's directly connected to this stitch. However, this stitch here is protected by the barrel of your knitting needle. So when I enter, it really can't steal a lot of yarn from this stitch. However, this stitch here, the one that ends up laying below my SSK, this isn't protected by my knitting needle, anymore. So if I pull on this strand here, I can close this stitch here. And this is the problem of SSK, because no matter how hard I pull on this stitch, because there's so much friction, I won't be able to affect this stitch here anymore. The stitch that ends up laying on top, this stitch that often looks less neat. And that's why Knit 2 Together Left has this added advantage, because you can affect this loop while you knit. However, you can also modify the way you knit your SSK. So you knit your SSK, and then here, as you finish it, you yank on this stitch, and as you yank, you can actually still kind of affect this stitch, and then you distribute that slack here, see, among the adjacent stitches for an SSK that is a lot neater. So one more time, slip, slip, pull through, and then you yank on this stitch here, and then you distribute the slack. And the rest is up to you. Analyze your knitting and then check which version is easiest and neatest for you. Instead of a long tail cast on, you can also start your project with a single cast on. So you just string these loops here onto your knitting needle. So very, very simple motion. See? You are creating these little twisted loops here on your knitting needle. And then you turn around and purl all stitches through the back loop. Purl every single stitch through the back loop, and if this was in the round, of course you would have to knit them through the back loop. When you do a long tail cast on, you typically start in this famous slingshot position, and then you do it like so. So let's take a look at your thumb. Your thumb is doing this. Your thumb is continuously doing this. And then you go here, so this is the loop on your knitting needle, and you knit it through the back loop. You create a twisted loop, knit it through the back loop. Create a twisted loop, knit it through the back loop. That's why you can always start with two ends of your skein or with two different skeins, and then do the long tail cast on like this. I'm using contrasting colors here intentionally, because if you cast on like this using two different skeins, or you pull from the center and from the outside, the size of your tail will doesn't matter, so you will never run out of yarn. And once you cast on the required number of stitches, you just turn around and continue knitting. Of course, this tail here needs to be woven in later on. So why is this important? Well, I often get the question regarding fixing stitches, because sometimes your knitting unravels, and it unravels all the way down to your cast on, and your project looks like this. So especially sometimes when you drop a stitch in the first row or round, so how do you fix it? Well, very, very easy. Okay, so you start with your crochet hook like so, and then you turn it around once counterclockwise. Now you can already see how the twisted loop you created slants in the exact same direction. See, in the exact same direction as the rest of your cast on. And from here you can easily find the first ladder and pull that through. This will typically be a little bit more tricky, but then things should be easy, and then you can simply ladder back up, and there you go. You fixed your cast on stitch. Isn't this easy? Do you like this video so far? Yes? Well, then please, please, please consider supporting my work on Patreon. Without my loyal subscribers, I wouldn't be able to offer a video like this one that took years of research, personal understanding, and many, many hours to compile and record for free. Without the financial support of my patrons, I would be left with having annoying sponsors in every second video and, always being forced to skirt on the surface and never would have the time to really dive down deep, and my titles would be increasingly annoying and clickbaity on top of that. Nobody really wants that. Nobody has time for that. So please help me keep this channel as a free resource for everyone. Either way, here are some more insights for you. Earlier in this video, I said that instead of knitting an SSK, you can also slip one knitwise, knit one, and pass over. Same thing. Now let's take a look at a standard bind off. Knit one, pass over, knit one, pass over, knit one, pass over. So essentially what you are doing here is you are chaining SSK. So let's prove that. So I slip that back, knit through the back loop, slip that back, knit, knit, knit through the back loop, slip that back, slip, slip, knit. Let's take a look at our edge. It's the same thing. So a bind off is nothing else but chaining SSKs. But this also means if SSK works well, you can also use knit two together through the back loop and do it like this in one go. See, I can also do it like so. Let's take a look for a slightly different edge. So the difference is here, see, the base stitch is twisted. The edge itself is the same, but the base stitch is twisted. Here the base stitch isn't twisted. So what does this tell you? A bind off is actually just like the long tail cast on. You are knitting one row plus the bind off. So just like with the long tail cast on, you are doing two things at the same time. So let's use that knowledge. So I can also stop knitting here, transfer all these stitches here to this knitting needle, turn around, and now I can just pass over stitches like so. You could also do this with a crochet hook, but let's do it like so. So I can also pass over stitches like so. And then here, maybe do one more stitch here. And then continue knitting in the other direction. However, you cannot use this trick to achieve level sides. So you can see, or I hope you can see, that this edge here sits one row below this here. This is one row higher because I stopped knitting here, and this side, I didn't finish this row, so this side here lacks one row as opposed to this side. So even though you can use this trick to bind off on this side, it's actually not really fixing the issue. So here's how to fix this problem. So I stopped knitting my row 6 stitches here before the end, and then I will form such a little, here can you see this? Such a little loop here where here the trailing end here is trapped in between the working yarn and your work. However, you will have to do this loop quite a bit larger, and then you just pick up your working yarn the normal way. So, like so. So this is just my working yarn. However, I am trapping my loop here in between working yarn and my work. And then you knit one stitch, but make sure that you knit quite loosely. And then you need to find that loop here, and you need to knit below the loop. See? Again, knit quite loosely, then knit another stitch, again quite loosely, and bring up the loop here again, and you need to knit below it. Knit one stitch, remember to knit loosely, then find the loop one more time here and just knit below it. And this should be the result. Now if you turn your work around, the working yarn should be in the exact same spot you want it to be. However, you still have this little loop here you don't really need. However, you can just pull on your working yarn and slowly close that loop. Make sure that you don't pull too tight on the working yarn. You don't want this section to pucker. And now you can pick up your work again and we can employ the same trick. So without actually knitting anything, we just pass these loops over one at a time until you come to the very spot where your working yarn is still attached, and then you can just continue knitting any way you like. You can pass over this stitch as well, so you could knit it and pass it over like so, depending on the kind of transition you want right there at the edge. And then here on the right side, you can clearly see how these two edges are on the exact same level, and there's the exact same number of rows on either side, and there is no little stair. Again, make sure that you knit these last stitches a little bit more on the looser side, otherwise this edge here will end up being too tight. But if you ask me, we are still not done totally understanding the creases. So we already established that you can slip one, knit one, pass over to achieve a left-leaning decrease. But you can totally take this concept even further. So if you want a knit two together, you can knit one, slip that back to the left needle, pass over, slip that back. I often use this trick when I need to knit two together at the very end of a knitting needle. Sometimes it's very, very difficult to enter the stitch here, so to speak, against the grain, and then I just knit one stitch, slip back, pass over, and finish my knit two together like this. Often this is a lot neater and easier to knit than trying to knit it the normal way. Now this knowledge isn't limited to the right side. Take purl two together through the back loop, for example, one of the most difficult stitches in knitting. So you need to enter these two purl stitches through the back loop at the same time, and then kind of weasel the yarn through. And even for me, that's difficult. However, it doesn't need to be difficult, because you can also just purl one stitch, slip that back, and we want it to be left leaning on the right side. So we just pass that over and continue knitting. And if you take a look at the result here on the right side, you can clearly see that this is the exact same stitch with a twisted here left leaning stitch ending up on top. But what if you need a double decrease and need to decrease 2 stitches in one go? Well, you can slip 2 stitches, knit 1, and pass over these 2 stitches for a left leaning double decrease. But you could also do it like this: knit 1, slip back, pass over another stitch, and then you have a right leaning double decrease. And if you want a centered double decrease, well, you slip 1, knit 1, pass over, slip back, and pass over. And then you slip back and continue knitting. There is your centered double decrease. Now, if you take a closer look at this centered decrease, you will notice that while it is indeed centered, the central stitch is below the little stack, and that's quite unsurprising because we kind of stacked the other stitches upon the center stitch and we knitted that first. So as a remedy, you can start by slipping 2 stitches knitwise at the same time. This will change their order. Remember the cable knitting from the SSK example. So this will change their order. Now I will knit 1 stitch, and now I pass these stitches over one at a time, and the result will be a centered decrease where the center stitch comes out on top. Without this slipping trick, you would have to knit it like so. So I'm gonna move this leftmost stitch of my double decrease over to the right side here without a cable needle, like so. So I'm gonna move this leftmost stitch here over to the right. So I rearranged the order, and now I'm gonna knit these stitches here together. This is quite tricky, but the result will be the exact same centered double decrease. However, I feel that doing it like this, slipping to knitwise and then passing over, is quite a bit easier. And once you understand that whichever stitch you pass over, the one that you've knitted the last, will define the lean of your stitch, you can easily make up your own brioche decreases. So a lot of people are very scared of brioche knitting because decreases and increases can be just so tricky. So let's suppose you want to knit a brioche double decrease where this rib here ends up on top. Well, I stop here before a brioche decrease, a brioche knit, and then I'm gonna slip 2 stitches knitwise. Then I want this stitch, I want this to be centered. So in this case, because there are so many stitches involved, I'm slipping this to a cable needle and hold it in front. And then I'm gonna knit 1 stitch. And now I can start stacking. I'm gonna pass this stitch here over, slip back to the left side. Then I'm gonna take this double or brioche knit and pass it over. Slip back. Pass this here over. And now I only need to decrease or pass over here my brioche knit I want to keep in the center, so I'm gonna just pass this over. This takes a bit of force, but there you go. There is your brioche double decrease, and all you did was tossing stitches over one another. It's really not complicated at all, and you could apply the exact same knowledge here to standard knitting and stockinette stitch as well. So you could slip to knitwise. Then here, this is the central stitch. This is the stitch you want to come out on top. then you knit one stitch, pass over, slip back, pass over, slip back, pass over, and then you pick up the central stitch again and like so, and then you pass over, just making this up on the fly. And here you would have a centered quadruple decrease for standard knitting. So really, I want you to understand that decreases are no big mystery, no matter if it's stockinette stitch, brioche knitting, double knitting or so. You just pick one central stitch and then you basically stack hoops upon each other, or rather loops of your knitting, and the last loop you stack upon the stack, it's gonna define the lean of the whole stack, because this is gonna be the loop that lays on top, the most visible one, and that's the whole secret. There's one notable exception, or rather addition, I need to fill in here. So you just saw me slipping stitches knitwise, and sometimes I slip them purlwise. So what's up with that? So it has to do with your knitting direction and the way the stitches sit on your knitting needle. So the stitches here on your knitting needle, they are actually twisted. So in your fabric, your stitches sit like this. And if you untwist them, you can actually see the little V. But on your knitting needle, they are twisted like so. So let's suppose I want to knit a centered double decrease. So I would knit this stitch here, and then I pass over this stitch here. And if I pass over this stitch, because it's already twisted in this direction, here, by doing it like that, I am untwisting it. If I pass over in this direction, you can see that this stitch here is twisted. And if I pass it over in this direction, it stays twisted. So all the stitches that are to the right of the decrease the stitch you're passing over need to be untwisted. So by slipping it knitwise, you can see this happening. You are untwisting it, and then if you pass over, things will be straight. So, and you can really use this knowledge. Say you want to create a twisted left-leaning double decrease. Then you slip 2 stitches, knit 1, and pass over. There would be your twisted double decrease, left-leaning. And if you want to have it a right-leaning twisted decrease, then if I pass over, these will be balanced. So what do? Well, I slip them knitwise, thereby I twist them, and now when I pass over, voila, like so, the result will see this is twisted. The result will be a twisted double decrease. And with that knowledge, you can basically create your own decreases. Do you want it balanced or twisted? Then you slip them whichever way you like. Now, of course, I don't want to leave out increases. So let's knit a make one left together. So I pick up the strand between 2 stitches here from the front. So the picked up strand leans towards the left. And then I knit that through the back loop. Easy as that. Now, a couple of rows later, you can clearly see the make one left here. This loop here is leaning towards the left. That's why it's a left leaning increase. But what happens if I drop a stitch and accidentally unravel the make one left? How do I fix things? Well, make one left is nothing else but doing a yarn over, and then in the next row, when you come to the yarn over, you work it twisted. So in this case, I purl it through the back loop. So to fix things, here this is the strand between two stitches, and we need to pick it up in a way that here this leg here leans towards the left. So we come in from behind and pick it up like so. And then we can ladder back up. And there is our fixed make one left. Now make one left is based on a yarn over. So a yarn over is like so, see? Then I continue knitting. That's my yarn over, and if I pick up the strand here between the knitting needles like so, that's the exact same. See? Here, these are the same things. Make one right on the other hand. Here you pick up the yarn like so. So this leg here leans towards the right. And then you knit it. So make one right on the other hand is not based on a yarn over, rather it's based on a reverse yarn over like so. That is make one right. Now if you were to drop a make one right, you can also fix that, and in this case, so for make one left you turn clockwise to achieve here a leg that leans towards the left. And for make one right, you just turn counterclockwise. And then this little leg here, see how it leans towards the right. And then you can just use your crochet hook to get back to the top. Like so. And there is your fixed make one right. The same can be done with lifted increases. So I can knit into one stitch here, but instead of dropping this loop, I slip it to the knitting needle and continue knitting. And then in the next round or row where I come to this little double stitch, I just work across. Just like yarn over and make one left, I can also knit this in one go. So I go into the stitch 2 rows below. So this is the first row below, this is the second row below, and pick up this loop here and then knit it through the back loop for the exact same result. So here are the 2 increases. Here, see, it's the exact same increase. However, this version is a little bit looser. Of course, as you knit it, you can still add slack, whereas if you knit into a row further down below, the yarn is already fixed, so you can only steal yarn from adjacent stitches, and that's why this version here is a little bit tighter than knitting it in 2 steps. So what happens if you unravel such a lifted increase? Well, you pick or try to find, so you can clearly see that these rungs here of the ladder are still tight, whereas here these are quite wide. This is where the stitch unraveled. So you pick this left loop here, and then you simply find the first rung that is a little bit looser and ladder back up, and there is your fixed lifted increase. And if you are wondering about the lean of an increase in this context, it really couldn't be simpler. So again, for make one left, you twist the loop around like so. So this leg here leans towards the left. That's what defines this increase as left leaning, nothing else. And for make one right, this leg here leans towards the right, or appears to lean towards the right. The increase in itself, you can use it wherever, it doesn't matter. It's just that this twisted loop here gives the appearance of right leaning. It's not actually right leaning, and the same applies to lifted increase. So I can pick up the loop here, this left loop of a stitch one row below, and then ladder back up, or I can insert a stitch here to the right of that stitch and then ladder back up, and my stitches here getting a little bit frayed, and ladder back up. So that is the whole secret behind left and right leading increases. It's not, unlike with decreases, by the way, it's not that these increases actually lean to the left, but they give the appearance of leaning towards the left or the right, but you can use them wherever. Now, I could go on and on like this, but all good things need to end somewhere, I guess. Still, I hope the next time you run into a knitting problem, you are quite a little bit better equipped to find a solution, because in this video, if you think about it, I showed you how knit and purl stitches work, backward and forwards, this direction and this direction. I showed you how cast-ons and bind-off works and how they are related to decreases and increases. Remember, the yarn over, rather than make one left when I ladder it back up, wasn't that the same as the long tail cast-on? Just think about it for a moment. And that's why I would also like to invite you to dive a little bit deeper into knitting theory on your own. Use some scrap yarn and knit a swatch and toy around with your own problems and your own ideas, because quite truthfully, you cannot rely on knitting instructors forever and for each and every problem. At one point, you need to solve your own problems, especially since most knitting instructors, like myself or that helpful lady at the local yarn shop, actually don't earn any money at all when we answer your questions. We do it, but at one point we also need to pay our bills and do actual work. So on top of that, and that is possibly the more important factor here, most questions are so tied together with your individual knitting style, your yarn choices, your body configuration, and the pattern you are knitting, and all of these factors we possibly cannot know. So even if I wanted to, a lot of questions are not for me to answer. I can't tell you how many stitches you need to cast on for your sweater or your socks. Only a swatch and careful testing, as bothersome as this may sound, can reveal the truth. And hopefully this video here was one of many little puzzle pieces that will help you finding your answers according to your preferences. Happy knitting and enjoy the rest of your day.